Hi there, my name is Sean Logue. This is my Jing for the final for XML Programming at Manchester Community College, spring of 2019. So I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. I just finished recording my Jing for my other class with you, the Database Design and Programming one, which came out to be 11 minutes. It's about twice as long as they normally are, so I apologize for that, but let's just dive right into it. So this week, what you asked us to do is download a number of XML files and basically figure out what was going on with them. If we look at an example, like this first one, we'll open it here. We can see it's an XML file. Buses is the root element with some attributes. Then there's the time element, then bus with some children elements on there. We see bus ID, root, I'm assuming, root 22, especially as that's showing up there. A number of categories with D, for instance, southbound, northbound, and south, I'm assuming. I'm not entirely sure what all those stood for, but I took D as the direction. The latitude, the longitude, again, I'm somewhat assuming. Another northbound category, not sure about that. And then this Howard thing I found quite interesting. I did not go through all of these numbers for each and every bit of information or each and every file. So these files seem to contain bus data. I actually somewhat remembered this being used in another class, so I believe it's for Chicago, but I checked just to make sure, and I believe it's from the CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority. So part of what we were asked to do is to combine all these files into one master file. This is the file right here. I named it master copy. We can see it still has the XML intro, then it goes to buses. One major change I did, and I explained in my wiki and such, is that I took time from being a sister element to bus and put it as a sub element of bus. I was having trouble displaying the time when searching for searching by categories down here, such as southbound, ID, latitude, longitude, things like that. So how did I combine those? I used this Python program that I named combine. Basically what this file does, it opens the master copy file to wipe it clean to make sure I'm not just constantly adding on and enlarging it. Then it sets a counter, and while the counter is less than 200, it opens a file name, and I did less than 200 because they are named from 100 to 199, just to clarify. So the counter is what I use to identify the name of the XML document which I'm opening. I read that file, I open the master copy file with the append function, and then I add the XML file to it. So eventually it becomes just a combination of each of these files. So all of these files just copied and pasted into one, essentially. Obviously that creates some formatting issues, which I described like with the time thing. So I have this file, delete buses, because that's originally all I was doing. What I do is I open the main file and I read lines from it. Oops, scrolled a little bit too far. Then let's see. So if buses is in the line, then I add it, I keep count basically because I want one buses line in there, the beginning one, which opens the root element. If the counter is less than or equal to 1, it writes the line. Otherwise, it passes. If bus is not in the line, then it just writes. So in other words, it's wiping the master file with the information therein saved, and then it takes that saved information and writes everything except the lines I don't want, which are the subsequent buses files. And then I also do the same with XML in that line because I don't want the XML documentation in there after every file in the master file. And then somewhere along here, I don't know where it is in this specific delete buses file, but basically what it does is it adds a buses. Oh, here it is right here. Oh, another thing I did, I believe, is I used sort of like a text wrapper type thing to insert a tab to make sure that time would line up properly with the other sub elements of bus. And then I add the closing tag for the root element there. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes already. Okay, we're not doing great. Anyway, this is the file that I used to parse it. You can see that I used element tree up here, which I imported. Don't disregard this text. It's just sort of playing around getting used to element tree. I have a number of lists here, and that's how I iterated over it. And well, that's how I pulled information from the file. So for bus in, iterating over the root, looking for a bus tag, I request counter ignore. I don't know if I use that, but these are all variables that I assigned to parsed information from that. So it finds the time and takes the text within and assigns that text as a variable. And you can see here, all of these if statements basically add to the lists up here. And then once all that information is in lists, then I can do some cool things with it. So for instance, I can print each of the times that appeared. Now up here, I have, for instance, if time not in the list times. So that won't show repeats of time. That could also be fairly interesting to see how many times each time was collected, if that makes any sense. So if I run this file real quick, I guess I'll run it. As we can see, that's a lot of information. That's printing all of this. So it's showing the information from the file wherever the ID, the bus ID was 1719. I believe it should have that in every single file. So that's about 100 of these. If we scroll up to the top, it'll show from the first file that the time is 10:06 a.m. Southbound is one of the fields. Northbound is in a different field. Again, I don't know what these subsequent ones do. The latitude, the longitude, and things like that. If we scroll further down to the end to show the other things that it shows, this is the list of all the different times where where the bus data was collected. One thing we can gather from this is something I wrote down here. The buses run from 10:06 a.m. to 12:35 p.m. Now, technically, the buses might run longer than that, but that's all the data that we have is for these roughly 2.5 hours. The Howard and Harrison, that's from the FS tag in the document. I don't know entirely what that means. It looks like those are two of the stops. So I was wondering if maybe that meant first stop, but I'm not entirely sure why that would matter. But this is a bus system. I don't know anything about bus systems. One thing I also did is I took the maximum and minimum for the latitudes and longitudes. This can also be used to find out that the city is Chicago, which I did check on. This is a list of all the bus IDs. At 10:36, 7 buses were traveling northbound. At 10:36, 6 buses were traveling southbound. So that's 13 of the buses out of all of these. All 17, I believe. Yep, 17 buses running bus route 22. And let's see. One thing I thought was kind of funny, this bus ID goes south, east, north, west, then northwest, then northeast, then southeast. So it seems to be going in a sort of counterclockwise and then back clockwise direction. And then 1917 goes south, southeast, north, northwest, which is also counterclockwise. But I believe that changes with these following buses. I didn't want to do each one because I felt like that would just be messy and might not show anything super interesting. So as you can see, I was able to pull some pretty interesting information out of there. I believe you also asked for a DOM for this, like a document object model. This is a graphic that I used to show it. So the root is buses. Then in my document, I made the next child of that bus, and that's the only child. And that goes to a number of child elements of its own, such as ID, time, direction, latitude, longitude, and FS, or first stop, I'm assuming. So that shows that. And then I did just want to show, I didn't have luck the week that we searched or worked with the DOM. I'm realizing now that a lot of the tutorial for that on Tutorials Point required you to use Java and Ajax. And I don't know if I have that properly set up because I've used Python, obviously. So I don't know if I did this right, but I did basically use their template, but then enter my own information in, such as ID, time, latitude, longitude. I basically replaced all of their tags for their sample document with these. It doesn't show correctly, in the browser. I already tried it, but I did just want to show you that I did make a DOM for it. And then I also took some notes from a video I watched. I forget if it's the one you linked or not, on SQL versus NoSQL. And I explained a lot of this information in the wiki. So I hope that answers some of the final questions. Once again, I've racked up over 10 minutes of talking, but I do feel it's important with the final to sort of describe everything I know in some way. And I'm sure I'm missing things, but I did just want to show you that I put in a good amount of work. And I feel like I did fairly well with this. I thought it was really interesting, and I always feel good making programs in Python. To be able to use it with XML, which is something I've obviously been working with in this class for the whole semester, felt really, really good and made me more confident in my skills with both XML and Python. So my name is Sean Logue. This has been my final Jing, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.